the study of animal play has been fragmented and rather scattershot. There have been only 5 books on this that devoted to the subject exclusively since the first book, which was written in 1896. The reason for this neglect, if I may, is perhaps twofold. One is that play is difficult to identify. It's hard to be certain, I think, that an animal is playing. Another is that play is perhaps hard to define.
Greetings, I'm Yvonne Stapp, Science for the Public, and I welcome you to our Contemporary Science Issues and Innovations program. While human play is widely recognized as important for development, for animals, the role of play is not so certain. Today, we learn why scientific interest in animal play is increasing and just how extensive and creative this kind of play is. Our guest is David Toomey, professor of English at the University of Massachusetts-Amherst and also co-director of that English department's Professional Writing and Technical Communications program. Dr. Toomey is the author of this wonderful book, Kingdom of Play, What Ball-Bouncing Octopuses, Belly-Flopping Monkeys, and Mud-Sliding Elephants Reveal About Life Itself. And let's see, and this describes the imaginative play of many creatures and considers the purpose of this behavior. In addition to his extensive scholarly work, Dr. Toomey has written for the general public a number of award-winning books on multiple topics. And Kingdom of Play looks like another award. Dr. Toomey, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Yvonne. My pleasure. So I would just want to introduce the topic a bit and give some background, okay, and generally look through the book briefly. So play is a subject I think is intrinsically interesting to most people. And I think many of us have looked at animals playing, dogs, maybe birds, certainly cats, and wondered exactly how they're playing, why they're playing, and things. And we've wondered about the behavior generally, and we've wondered about it specifically. I think it comes as a surprise to many, or would come as a surprise to many. It did come as a surprise to me to learn that the study of animal play has been fragmented and rather scattershot. There have been only 5 books on this that devoted to the subject exclusively since the first book, which was written in 1896. The reason for this neglect, if I may, is perhaps twofold. One is that play is difficult to identify. It's hard to be certain, I think, that an animal is playing. Another is that play is perhaps hard to define. It's been hard to define perhaps in humans. And so the subject, it's not to say that the subject hasn't received attention from scientists, from animal behaviorists and ethologists. It has. But it's been if one looks at the research, the research in print, for instance, you'll find there's no journal of animal play. There's no institute of animal play. There is no department of animal play in any college or university. And the papers published on animal play are very specific. It might be mating behavior versus play in red squirrels, for instance. So the problem scientists have here is knowing that a certain behavior is play and not something else. Maybe is it fighting? Is it mating behavior? Is it exploration? So a number of scientists have worked to come up with definitions, and one of them who may have thought most about this issue, this problem of defining play, is Gordon Burkhardt. Gordon Burkhardt has identified 5 features of play that he says, or he claims, and he claims with some justification, I think, that these characteristics do define play. So one is that play in no way assists an animal in its survival or its reproduction. It has no obvious immediate function, unlike, say, hunting or foraging. Another feature of play, says Burkhardt, is that it is voluntary. That is, an animal plays of its own free will. An animal cannot be forced to play. And forced play, one might say, is an oxymoron. The third one is that the movements of an animal playing are repeated, but they are also varied. Now, I think we've seen animals that are unhealthy or perhaps caged, repeating their movements. A wolf in a cage may walk back and forth and pace back and forth all day. That is not a healthy wolf. I think we would agree. An animal that's playing will vary its movement. Say a pony frolicking in a field. It'll throw its head back. It will jump on it. It raise its forelegs and jump and throw its head back in a slightly different direction. So the movements are repeated in a way, but they're also varied. The last characteristic of an animal playing, or how you know an animal's playing, it plays only when it is well fed and safe and rested. An animal does not play when it's tired or endangered or hungry, or will play less, we should say. So these are Burkhardt's definitions of animal play, and they've been very helpful for scientists who are working to identify animal play. In the 100 or so years since this study, since scientists, ethologists, animal behaviors have been studying animal play, there are 2 theories explaining its adaptive advantage. Many people would say, why does play need an adaptive advantage? Why do we have to even think about natural selection and evolution as it relates to play? Isn't it just enough that it's fun? Isn't that sufficient? Isn't that enough reason for animals to play? Well, an evolutionary biologist would say, no, not really. And the reason would be that play takes time and energy that an animal might spend or find more useful to spend in other pursuits, eating, mating, foraging, etc. Play can also be dangerous. So these are, one would say, disadvantages of play. And an evolutionary biologist would say these disadvantages are so serious that play, because it exists, must have advantages that outweigh those disadvantages. So what are they? There have been 2 hypotheses that most evolutionary biologists have believe now must have some role in play. One is that it is training for adult behavior. And I think this is the common view of what play is for. A cat, say, toying with a mouse, or a mouse toy is training for hunting. That's one. Another reason for an adaptive advantage of play is that it's socialization, which is to say, wolf cubs play together, and they must learn together because as adults they have to learn to hunt together. A lone wolf cannot successfully take down an elk. That wolf has to do it in a pack. So play is necessary to the survival of an individual wolf. It's also necessary to the survival of the pack. So those two adaptive advantages, that is training for adult behavior and socialization, both seem to explain the adaptive advantage of play, or be adaptive advantages of play. But they don't explain everything. And that's where things get really interesting. A lot of animals play, it seems, for other reasons. And one of them, a group of scientists came upon this idea from observing piglets. The Edinburgh Pig Park was an open air laboratory. It was a hillside of woods and fields and streams outside Edinburgh in the 1980s. And there were domestic animals there, allowed to roam free. And there were pigs there and piglets. And the piglets often scampered about and ran. And that's not hard to explain as an adaptive advantage. You run to escape a predator. Good. But strange to say, sometimes the piglets would stop running and tumble forward. They would deliberately fall down and do somersaults. The observers, the scientists, had a difficulty understanding what this was for. Unless you want to make yourself the predator's dinner, it did not seem to be a prudent behavior. On some consideration, they realized that in the wild, in nature, piglets don't scamper over even ground. They scamper over uneven ground, and there may be roots and stones and other inanimate objects. So the piglets weren't in tumbling and somersaulting, learning how to escape a predator. They were learning how to recover from a fall. In other words, they were deliberately making themselves fall so they might learn to recover. And this idea, which they came to call training for the unexpected, was put forth as a viable adaptive advantage of play. And that seems to be what a lot of play is. I think many of us have seen dogs, for instance. I knew a dog that would lie on his side and push a rag doll across the floor and push his face right against the floor and get the rag doll halfway across the floor, then get up and run around and then go back and push the dog the rest of the way. It was very inefficient way to get the rag doll across the floor. But it was a very efficient way to train for the unexpected. The dog was putting itself in an unusual position, one might say a disadvantageous position, so it could have a kind of a new experience. So this idea, this training for the unexpected, seems to explain a lot of play. And it may explain play in humans too. And we are, after all, animals. A lot of play seems not just a nice thing to have, it seems absolutely necessary. There have been studies, neurological studies of play, many of them conducted by Sergio and Vivian Pellis at the University of Lethbridge in Canada. And they have worked with laboratory rats now for decades and they and their graduate students and their colleagues have done hundreds of experiments. And one thing they know is, I think a lot of these researchers who work with with lab rats now, that a rat denied play in its youth becomes asocial as an adult. If it's denied play in its youth, as an adult, it becomes overly aggressive, so aggressive that other rats don't want to play with it, or becomes overly fearful and will just cower in the corner. So play is necessary to a healthy adult. And that's pretty interesting and one might say important, and may bear on our own ideas of play. There are, I think, a lot of scientists interested in play, and Gordon Burkhardt particularly, have been surprised and interested in what animals play. A lot of us, I think most of us, know that dogs play, and mammals play. We've seen birds play. But what Burkhardt found was that reptiles play, perhaps fish play. There have been studies of play in octopuses, and there have been studies of play, and this is a surprise to many people, in bees. Just last year, a group of scientists were curious about bee play and bee socialization. And I think we all know, I think, that bees communicate. They are astonishingly intelligent, and they recall directions. They give each other directions with the waggle dance. They even seem to be able to count. So this group of scientists conducted a fascinating experiment. There were two chambers. One was empty. Another adjoining chamber was filled with bee-sized wooden balls, and the bees were allowed to go in either of the chambers. On the other side of the chambers, on the other side of the bees, was a food source, and the bees could go through the empty one and get to the food source faster and more efficiently, or they could go through the chamber with the wooden balls in it. And a lot of bees went through the chamber with the wooden balls, and they didn't just go to the food either. They stopped to play with the wooden balls. Some played quite a bit. And it should be said, these bees hadn't eaten in a while. So clearly the bees, at least some of them, preferred to play rather than eat. So insects play. This came as quite a surprise. So the boundaries of play, the boundaries of play in terms of animals, it's quite unclear. What animals play and what don't play. The quick answer is more animals play than a lot of people have thought played. The book talks a bit about the evolution of play, and this is where things get speculative, because behaviors are pretty hard to trace in terms of evolution. But we can guess. And play does seem to be very old, perhaps even ancient. And this is because it appears in so many phyla. It may be a case of what's called convergent evolution, which it has such an adaptive advantage, like, say, the eye, that it appeared independently in more than one evolutionary line. But what I found interesting in a book when I began to refresh myself on natural selection and Darwin's ideas of evolution, the features that define evolution also are the features that define play. For instance, evolution is purposeless. It does not, an evolutionary line is not directed towards any particular end. That is to say, it is open-ended. That is, evolution doesn't stop. It is provisional. That is, every stage of evolution is impermanent and ever changing. Evolution, as I think we know, is wasteful, is profligate. One thinks about pollen or seeds or fish eggs. It brings order from disorder. It holds competition and collaboration and balance. A number of features that define evolution also define play. It also is purposeless and it's open-ended. A game is over, say, two dogs play fighting, have not agreed on when the play fighting will stop. It just stops when they become too tired or just interested in something else. It's also wasteful. That is to say, I've already said its wastefulness is a reason, its evident wastefulness is a reason ethologists became interested in its adaptive advantage to begin with. It holds competition and cooperation in balance, which is to say, dogs play fighting. And I think we've all seen dogs play fighting, although some people may not. Some people may mistake it for actual fighting. It's not. It's different in obvious ways. The dogs play fighting have a kind of protocol that they agree upon. That is to say, one dog invites another to fight when it bows its head. The play bow is what that particular behavior is called. And play fighting dogs can get a bit too frisky sometimes. One might bite too hard. If it does, then it backs off immediately and performs a play bow again, which is to say to the other dog, sorry, my bad, didn't mean to bite that hard. If the other dog accepts this apology, it may perform its own play bow. And they continue to fight if all goes well. So those two dogs are cooperating because they've agreed upon protocol, but they're also competing. There is, at least moments, a winner and a loser. The dog pouncing on the other, at least for the moment, is winning the play fight. The dog who's rolled over on its back, at least for the moment, is acknowledging a kind of play defeat for a minute. So in these ways too, play is like natural selection, which is to say natural selection and play are both purposeless, open-ended, they're provisional, they're wasteful, they bring order from disorder, they hold competition and collaboration and balance. And because natural selection is the defining feature of living organisms, which is to say living organisms, one might say there are other defining features. That is, they grow, they consume, they eventually die. Well, those aren't really defining features. Those are not, those features might also describe a lot of other things like candle flames and stars. Even crystals reproduce. So take all that out and you're left with what's the defining feature of a living organism? It evolves. So a living organism is defined by evolution, which is, as Darwin reminds us, natural selection. So if the features of natural selection are the features of play, it's no great stretch, I think, to say that life itself fundamentally is playful. And I think I'll end there.
Okay, that's good. It gives us a little time here for questions. Thank you for all that good background. I have one thing to ask before we get to the list of questions, and that is, can you give us a few examples of some extraordinary play that you describe in your book? I'm thinking of one, is it the crow that has a jar lid and can zoom down a hill, and the elephants? There are a number of an octopus has a very good one about octopus, but they're quite amazing. It's some of the most unusual ones.
Sure. I think maybe the most spectacular kind of play is Montague's Harriers. Montague's Harriers drop catch. That is,
Yes, yeah,
one will carry a twig or a tuft of grass and fly ahead of another one and fly below it and behind it. It'll drop that twig or a tuft of grass. The other will catch it in midair. But yeah, octopuses play with objects, and there is a rather famous YouTube video of a crow that is snowboarding
yes, that's
with
what it was.
a jar lid. Um, Evidently, this is not an unusual behavior. People who live in snowy regions with ravens and crows around have seen it quite a bit. Yeah, and elephants, Indonesian elephants have been seen mudsliding. And all of these things you can find somewhere online.
Yeah, right. Well, I ask that because I think most of us are aware of, how cats and dogs and various animals that are familiar play. But some of the types of play that you mention are just really imaginative, and they're not necessarily linked to development of some behavior, but you think, gosh, it's a kind of evolution of intelligence and maybe imagination, whatever that is useful for, but it looks like great fun. I will go to some of the other questions now. That's not showing online. Oh, yes. One question here is, what does animal play tell us about sentience in animals? Are they conscious when we talk about sentience in humans? Are they conscious in the same way?
It's hard to know for sure, but certainly they are. It would seem they're experiencing pleasure, and it would also seem they do have inner lives.
Right. Here's another one. This viewer says that in watching squirrels chasing each other through the parks and up the trees and so on, are they playing, or is this an establishing territory, or what? Both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and mating sometimes. Yeah, there's a lot going on there, and squirrels present that. Squirrel behavior is particularly vexing to pathologists because it does seem to be all mixed up. And that shouldn't surprise us. Human play is all mixed up too, with mating and fighting. We do it all, sometimes all at once.
Right. Here's another one. What do you have to say about cross-species play? This is a good question. Like dogs and cats and horses and dogs and cats, they play across species.
Yeah, that is a new area of scientific inquiry, and that is an example. I think that is evidence that play is quite important. That animals can play across species. There's a number of studies of horses and dogs playing, and the horses and dogs each of them will self-handicap. That is, the dog won't bite as hard. The horse might lower its head or roll over on its back, so it can be more or less on the same level as the dog. Yeah, cross-species play is quite astonishing, and they how animals with totally different evolutionary backgrounds can agree on a protocol and can self-handicap to recognize the disadvantage of the other. and accommodate it. That's amazing.
Here's another thing is that can you tell us what your best example was in all these cases that you looked at and across many species, many organisms? What was the thing that either most surprised you or is of most interest of an example of play?
That's a hard question to answer. It depends.
Well, there are a lot of yeah.
I mean, it's almost like asking me what's my favorite color. I don't really have a favorite color. They're all
right.
They all seem amazing in their own ways.
Well, yeah, some of the examples you bring up in the book, like the crow that goes surfing or what, not surfing, but these kinds of activities are really striking, and most of us don't see that all of the time. So it's appreciated that you bring those up because it does broaden that topic of animals playing. Here's another question. Did studying animal play change your way of looking and thinking of animals?
Yes, absolutely. It's difficult to see any animal and not wondering now what's going on.
And you have more respect now, right?
I suppose so.
Okay.
I have more awareness of possibilities. Yeah.
Right. I understand. And in terms of in your book, there's a relationship. Somebody that thought they made a relationship between play and dreaming. Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, sure. The old theories that play is training for a behavior. That is, it's a kind of a simulation. Something like that might occur in dreams too. And I think we've all recognized that or had that. The dream you have the dream that my conscientious students have of being late for an exam is preparation and a kind of a warning that they should not be late for that exam. A lot of us had dreams where we're in either maybe terrifying situations or perhaps just uncomfortable situations, and they may be training for actual situations in our life. So dreaming may be playing without a body.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here's another one. First, is the play between humans and dogs and cats? People play with their pets. Is that a cross-species play?
Yes.
Is that an example? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And here's another. Do most animal species have the ability to play?
I don't know if anyone knows that right now.
Right. Because you have
to. Yeah, I mean, we don't have a complete census, and I don't know if we ever will. But I could say that of the groups of animals that play, mammals seem to do most of it. Most mammals play, and birds might come in second.
That raises another question. Is there an alignment or correlation with intelligence as the more intelligent a creature is? And I say that because of the bees that you mentioned. Most people, we don't think of bees playing or insects playing, but you mentioned that these bees are very intelligent actually, and they're very social. And here they came up with a very interesting kind of play. So is it intelligence? Does that tell you anything or predict play?
I would think intelligence or levels of intelligence predict complex play. That is, the more intelligent an animal, the more complex its play is likely to be. But how rudimentary an intelligence can be for an animal to still play, I don't think anyone knows.
Okay, right. Because as you mentioned, they're still studying. The people are just beginning to really get into this. Here's another question. Did studying animal play emphasize for you the importance of play? And that is something that we need in our lives, or presumably animals also.
Yes. Yes. I mean, a lot of that is how the book concludes, I think. And we all could do with playing more.
Absolutely, which is an interesting thing among humans for sure. And you've pointed out that lab animals, very confined lab animals also suffer if they, don't have that kind of liberty. Here's another one: is playing a form of problem solving?
If not a form of problem solving, it's preparation for problem solving, preparation for learning to problem solve.
And might be really important in that regard. But for those, I was thinking like the examples of the predator birds that you mentioned and so on, that does seem like the part of the play is preparation and development of those skills. And
yeah, if to say we play is more like if we put it in the realm of science, it's closer to pure science than applied science. It's like scientists or engineers working to solve a problem. Once they've solved it, they stop. So good, that's has its advantages. But scientists that are playing with a problem, they may solve it, but they continue to play. And they may find another solution, another way in, because there's no there's no clear end point. So in that sense, yes, play is very good for problem solving.
Dr. Toomey, you've written a lot of on a number of very different topics for the general public. So this is my question: how did you get into this one? This is very curious. Have you had this interest for a long time, or did just?
Well, a friend of mine told me last week that we were childhood friends, and he said I was wondering about whether birds were enjoying flying, and I didn't remember saying that. So, but evidently, it's been my interest for a while. But I got into this because I'd happened to read a paper that said that scientists had no overarching theory explaining animal play. And that was a surprise to me. I thought this seemed like something that should have been answered a long time ago. I did not realize it was an enduring mystery.
Yeah, and evidently it is. It's really difficult to come at, but it seems as though it's very clear that it is important. Whatever it is, it's important. And much maybe the same way that for humans, relaxation and joy and so on are important, but they may not lead to specific kinds of training or behavior or whatever. Before we end, could you talk about, there were a couple of examples about the octopus that it's hard to explain perhaps, but you did it very well in the book. It can actually move an object from here to there using how it blows the water out or the air through one of its little tube things.
Sure. Two researchers, Jennifer Mather and Roland Anderson, were curious about octopus play. They both studied octopuses, and they were aware that octopuses were quite intelligent, as I think most of us, we all are. So they arranged an experiment that would demonstrate or perhaps test whether octopuses played. And the octopuses were in a tank, put in a tank with floating objects. They were, as it were, Tylenol bottles, half filled with water, so they would float near the surface or right on the surface. And the octopuses using their excellent funnels. That is, a funnel which they can jet water. Octopuses usually use this to clean the dens or to push away something they don't like. But they've never been used to play. But the octopuses started, or some of them, I should say, started pushing the Tylenol bottles with the jet of water, with the excellent funnel. And there was the water in the tank was circulating. They push it into that current of water that circulated around the tank, waited for the Tylenol bottle to return, and then pushed it again. And one octopus had done this upwards of 10 times. When they saw that, they decided, well, there's no obvious adaptive advantage to this. The octopus clearly wasn't interested in the Tylenol bottles as food. It knew it wasn't a predator. It could only be, they decided, only be playing.
Another example that I thought was really very good was that I think it was a dolphin. I'm not sure that had been in an aquarium, but then it was returned to the sea, turned to the wild. But in the aquarium setup, it had been taught to stand on its tail. Is that correct? Or sort of walk on its tail, and it went and taught the wild dolphins to do that.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, dolphins in aquarium shows are trained to tail walk often. You can see them at the Boston Aquarium. But this particular dolphin, Billy, was rescued from the wild. Was in a polluted stream and taken into the aquarium to help it recover. Interestingly, Billy wasn't trained to tail walk, but she did see the others tail walking. And some weeks later, she was released into the wild, and the same scientists observed her a little bit later in the wild tail walking on open ocean. And moreover, a little bit after that, Billy, the octopus's name, the porpoise's name, had taught another porpoise, Wave, to tail walk too. So both of them were tail walking. So this is play as culture. This is an animal learning how to do something that one might say isn't perhaps natural, transmitting this behavior to a friend.
Yeah, there you have a number of examples like this that are really interesting. I think most of us are not familiar with them at all. And it goes across these different creatures, but especially the animals that are creatures that are known for their have such an imaginative approach to play, like kids almost. Okay, do we have time for this one more? Can we extrapolate that animals that coexist in swarms, packs and mobs and things like that, have higher levels of play, but not necessarily greater intelligence? So I guess that would be horses, cows, pigs.
I think we'd have to, by higher levels of play, do we mean complex play?
I guess so. I don't know.
Well, I think we could, I think it's fair to say that animals that live in groups have more social play. There, scientists who study play have roughly defined three categories. One is solitary play, that pony frolicking in the field. Mm-hmm. One is object play, the octopuses with the Tylenol bottles. And the other is social play. For instance, dogs play fighting, animals playing with each other. So I think, animals in groups are naturally more likely to be good at social play, and their social play is likely to be pretty complex.
Right. The last one there, somebody is asking, you mentioned the play of bees, that one example. Has there been, the person might have missed it, has there been any study of ants and bees that are a study of other insects that are social, I guess.
So far as there've been, insects playing, so far as I know, no. There are studies of ants being quite intelligent, though, of learning.
Definitely. Yeah. Right.
But that the group that studying bees at Queensland University in England probably is conducting some kind of ongoing research about this. I don't think that's going to be the last experiment.
Right. Nobody would have expected that, I'm sure. Well, I think that's it, Dr. Toomey. I appreciate so much your input here and for writing this book. And once again, can I show the book? Here it is. And you definitely should run out and buy it, The Kingdom of Play. And it's very, very readable, very interesting book. Thank you again, and best wishes.
Thank you.